Appreciate you streaming on in here on Birds 365 with McMullen and McDonald. We are joined by our pal from Bleeding Green Nation and the Eye on the Enemy podcast, Eagles opinion generator John Stolnis, who I hope is wearing Phillies red, not Kansas City Chief red. What is that you got on? I can't see the hat.
Yeah, Philly spring training hat, man. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
That we like. Also does Phillies writing as well. But we're here to talk Eagles with you today. Pretty big turnover in the Eagle coaching staff, John. We knew it was coming, knew there was a chance that they were going to get poached for their top coordinators for head coaching positions. And it filled those two roles, one with an advancement within their own staff and one from outside, which has had a domino effect. You like where the Eagle coaching staff is right now?
I think so. I think what more than anything else I feel about these moves is that I trust their process to hire coaches. I trust what Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman do in terms of bringing aboard head coaches. They've had a tremendous amount of success with that. But I think when they have been involved in the assistant coach process, I think we've seen some good things in recent seasons. I think where they went wrong was with Doug Peterson, some of his selections when he was here as far as his coaching staff is concerned. And you can argue whether or not a head coach should be allowed to have autonomy over his coaching staff. But I do think the way the Eagles put the interview processes together really filters out a lot of guys who they know aren't going to be a good fit for them and allows them to target the guys who are going to be a good fit. And so they know Brian Johnson really well. He was going to get an offensive coordinator job someplace else this offseason probably, or next offseason, if they didn't go ahead and promote him here. The work that he did along with the rest of the coaching staff, but to turn Jalen Hurts into the player that he's become, certainly he's deserving of this promotion. And we have to see how he does as a play caller. It's a totally different skill set, but he does have some experience at lower levels doing that. So I like Brian Johnson. He seems like a really smart up-and-comer. And we don't know a whole lot about Sean Desai as a defensive coordinator. He's only had one season under his belt as a DC. But everything you hear is that he's in the same line as Vic Fangio. I'm a little bit less enamored with somebody like that, if only because maybe Jonathan Gannon has left a sour taste in many of our mouths, and we are associating a Vic Fangio style defense with a Jonathan Gannon style defense. And I think we have to remember there are lots of shades of gray with regards to defense and defensive coordinators, and the talent that he's going to have at his disposal is going to be different than what Jonathan Gannon had. So I'm kind of more wait and see about Sean Desai, but also trusting the Eagles process and bringing these guys on here a little bit. I think they've earned that.
Yeah, it's kind of like when people dismiss Ohio State quarterbacks because, so 20 years ago is from Ohio State, he didn't work out. But yeah, I don't like when people just assume a coach is going to be a bad coach because he's running the same scheme or philosophy as the previous coach, who, by the way, was a pretty good coach. But we will agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah.
The political ramifications of it, though, John, that's my concern, because I'm sure you saw Marcus Hayes' report, and Art Wilson, don't know if it was his camp, but some people think he was fired. Other people say the Eagles say it was mutual. I kind of knew when they passed over to Denard Wilson, he wasn't going to stay. So however it shook out is not even the most important part to me. The fact that it creates these ripples, and I don't know if you want to call it controversy, whatever adjective you want to use, when you have these changes, that was one of the biggest strengths of the 2022 Eagles, in my estimation, John. Continuity on the coaching staff. Now, for better or for worse, they've lost 5. There's not going to be that continuity. Any concern over that?
Yeah, there's definitely concern over that. I think more on the defensive side than the offensive side. Promoting Brian Johnson in-house does allow Jalen Hurts especially to have a level of comfortability with what's been going on there the last couple of years. And really, Nick Sirianni is the guy who is the guiding force behind what they're going to do offensively. He may not call the plays, but he's putting together the game plan. So I'm not concerned from an offensive standpoint, because most of the players will be the same and most of the coaches will be the same. On the defensive side, they are at a crossroads. It's going to be a very interesting 2023 because we have no idea who the starters are going to be next year at so many different positions, what the player situation is going to look like with free agency and the draft. They're going to have to start relying on younger players more, with Jalen Hurts getting his contract this offseason, we assume. And so yeah, you bring in a new defensive coordinator and you ruffle some feathers maybe with some of the coaches that were here before and some other guys who have left. And certainly some of the players have their favorites as well. And if those guys are out the door or they feel they've been mistreated or mishandled in some way, it will cause a little bit of friction there, I think. But when it comes down to it, I think when the season starts, these guys all play for each other and they want to get back to the Super Bowl. I think the only way it really causes a big problem is if there's a communication issue between the coaches themselves and getting that message down to the players. And we'll just have to see how that works out. It's one of those things you can worry about. It's not really anything you can do anything about right now, though.
All right. I need a little bit of a coaching prediction from you. Brian Johnson's got 2 years NFL coaching experience. Not a lot. College previous, but only 2 years in the NFL. And none as a play caller in the National Football League, but he's got a great relationship with Jalen Hurts, which sure as hell is going to help. Will he be calling plays for the Eagles all year long? Or is there a chance at some point the head coach steps in and goes, hey, I gave it up. I can take it back?
I think Sirianni really likes not having to call the plays. I do think Brian Johnson will be the play caller the whole season. I don't anticipate that now that they've all been established there for a couple of years. I think they know what they want to do. And so when they were first getting started, I think part of the problem was they didn't really know what they had in Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts' game was so unrefined at the time, he really couldn't throw the ball effectively. They couldn't really access that part of his game. And I don't know that Nick Sirianni really knew what to do there. Shane Steichen seemed to have a good handle on how to transform the offense. Now they know what they have in Jalen Hurts. They have a guy who can throw the ball and run the ball. So I think they have an identity on offense now where I'm not as concerned about Brian Johnson coming in and totally messing up the play calling. There may be situations where he needs a little bit of help and maybe Nick does jump in. Maybe there's another guy on the staff who helps call play calls. If Brian Johnson does struggle with play calling, I don't think it's going to go back to Nick Sirianni. My guess is one of the other coaches will step up. The passing game coordinator will step up and call plays. And maybe it's just temporarily for a game or two to get a different voice in there. But I think Nick is very happy with the job, with how he has things lined up now in terms of responsibilities. And I don't think he wants that responsibility anymore.
Do you think we're kind of under, and I thought, because I have a lot of respect for Shane Steichen after watching him, after getting to talk to him, I think he had a real feel for play calling. I think there's a sort of, some guys are good at it. Some guys aren't. Some guys have it. Some guys don't. And the assumption, not that Brian isn't going to have it, but I think the assumption that he is going to have it is a pretty big one. He might even be better. I mean, that's a potential as well. But do you think people are kind of overlooking Shane Steichen's effectiveness because, we got 5 Pro Bowl offensive linemen, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders is probably going to be gone, but that's it. That's a lot of talent, but he was a big part of it as well. You think people are underestimating that at all?
I might be guilty of that too. Yeah, I think that's possible. He's great. I mean, there's a reason somebody snapped him up and waited until after the Super Bowl was over to go out and get him. I think he's going to be great with the Colts. He does seem to have like you said, there's a real rhythm to play calling and to be 3 or 4 steps ahead of what the defense thinks that you're going to be doing and using plays in the first quarter to set up plays in the third quarter and plays that you're going to call 2 or 3 games into the future. To have that kind of chess match playing in your head at all times, that's difficult. And there's not a lot of guys who are able to do that effectively. Like you said, we don't know if Brian Johnson has that ability. We know Shane Steichen did. He was an outstanding play caller. And we saw, even with all the talent that you just talked about, John, when in those few instances when the play calling was not its best this year, the offense did struggle. Play calling is important. You can have all these great players out there making plays, but if the play calling is not doing your players any favors, if the coaching staff is not putting them in a position to succeed, then even the best teams with the best offensive players are going to struggle to score points. So I do think we're underestimating that a little bit. I'm probably underestimating that a little bit. And I think optimistic, but it's a hopeful optimism that Brian Johnson or somebody else on the offensive staff will be able to call plays at least as well as Shane Steichen did. And that may be too much to ask considering Shane was so good at it.
And I like your might not be Sirianni, but could be Kevin Patullo. Look at it.
Mm-hmm.
That Shane is bought it, that Nick has bought into the CEO aspect of coaching. So if they do need a helping hand, it might come from someone else on the staff. You might be right about that. All right, let's see if you're right about this one. Need the crystal ball out again.
Okay.
We're only 4 days away from what should be a major decision for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that is whether Jason Kelce's going to play for him again this upcoming season. He's kind of on record as saying he's not going to make the Eagles worry about it, sweat, that he's going to free agency Isaac Seumalo. If they don't keep Kelce, then maybe they work hard to have Isaac in place. And if Kelce decides to retire, that starts Monday early.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we're talking about Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's only 4 days left before Jason Kelce's going to tell us whether he's going to be back or not. Are we going to know? Is it going to leak out, or are we going to have to speculate on this? And what do you think the word's going to be?
I think Jason Kelce will announce something on his social media, on his Instagram. I think it's what he did last year, right? And that's how he announced it, or at least that's how he teased it. I think we'll see something like that coming up here in the next few days. I do think he'll be back. He did not seem like a guy who was playing his final games in an Eagles uniform during the course of the playoff run and the Super Bowl. He's as effective as ever. I think a couple of seasons ago, when he was really seriously contemplating retirement, he was dealing with a lot more injuries than maybe he has the last year or two. He's been, obviously, anytime you're a mid-30s center in the NFL, you're going to be banged up, and there's no getting around that. Everybody is, and I'm sure he is dealing with things here at the end of the season, and it gets harder as you get older to get past them and get over them. That being said, it seemed like he was having so much fun this year playing with Jalen Hurts and playing in this offense and playing for a Super Bowl contender. And my guess is that getting so close this year within one play, one defensive stop, one turnover, one strip sack away from winning a second Super Bowl, losing to his brother in the Super Bowl, and certainly the possibility there that he could play his brother again in another Super Bowl this year or the next year. Doesn't seem to me like he's in any way going to considering retirement. I would be shocked if he retires. I'll put it that way.
I'm with you, John. I've completely done a 180 on this. I think he's coming back to play. The NFL is going to give out their scripts early. It's going to be Kelce Bowl 2. You got to pump up the hits of the New Heights podcast. He's got that to do.
That's right.
I think he's coming back. I'm with you 100%. But there's a bunch of guys who aren't coming back. You were in the green room. You might have heard I mentioned Adam Schefter talking about numbers with Javon Hargrave, 20 million potentially. CJ, 14 million, 13, 14. We kind of know James Bradbury's not going to be back. If they lost all three of those players, how disappointed would you be? How upset? How scared, if that's the adjective you want to use? How big of a hit would that be?
I would be surprised, and I don't know if I'd be mad, because it would depend on what they're going to do to replace those guys. And really, that's the whole story here, is if they don't bring any of those three guys back, Hargrave or Bradbury or CJ, GJ, then what are you doing to replace them? It's pretty clear the 2022 draft picks have to step up this year. Jordan Davis has to start and play really well. Nakobe Dean has to start and play really well at one of the linebacker spots. And Cam Jurgens has to step in at guard for Isaac Seumalo, right? And so you got to get something out of that draft capital. We also have to get something, I think, from the rookies that we're going to draft this year, too. The Eagles really got no production from any rookies in 2022. The undrafted rookie Reed Blankenship is the only guy who really made significant contributions. Jordan Davis was hurt most of the year. So you're going to have to get some improvement from some of these young draftees. But I do think they need to bring at least one of those three guys back. I would be disappointed if they don't get one of those three guys back in here. I think Howie is good enough with the cap to make something like that work. But at the end of the day, I think they got to bring one of those three guys back, and each one of those guys has positives to bringing them back and negatives to bringing them back, reasons to do it and reasons not to do it. And that's a calculation. Howie's got to look and see, who can I maybe get in trade? If I lose one of these guys in free agency, are there other free agents who are not quite as expensive? And the other thing that I'm thinking of with these free agents is, I don't want to pay for past performance. Right. My concern with re-signing Hargrave to a 3-year deal, signing Bradbury to a 3 or a 4-year deal is, are you paying for the past performance, or are you paying for what you're going to get from these guys as they age into their 30s? And for a team that has a Super Bowl window right now, if you can guarantee me the next for 2023 and 2024, you're going to get the same players, I would be happy to give those guys free agent contracts. But at their stages, at their ages, it's a question mark as to whether or not you're paying for past performance or whether you're going to get that kind of performance in the future.
Grant Calcaterra just texted me and said he'd be glad to send you the highlight package of his 5 catches this year, since you said the Eagle rookies did nothing.
I hope he's on speed dial. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Tied to the question that John just asked you, the Eagles and the price of their free agents and the like. And I think I know you well, Stolnis, enough that you'll be on the same page with John and I here. John and I both fight back against those who say, oh, Jalen Hurts got to give the Eagles a hometown discount. He's got to take less because he can put better players around him. He's got to give Howie. And John and I just roll our eyes and shake our heads when we hear that. Here's my question for you. How come nobody ever says that about any of the other Eagle free agents? Why shouldn't they all get together, all for one for all, hands in the middle? Let's do this for the town. Let's do this for the team. We'll all take a haircut. We'll all play for less money. No, only the quarterback is the one who's expected to take less than everybody else. Why isn't Javon Hargrave? If Adam Schefter says 20, why doesn't Javon just take 15 and give Howie Roseman 5 to play with somewhere else? I know they're the biggest earners, but why are they expected to hold the team up and take less in their own pocket when nobody else gets mentioned in that vein?
That's a great point. And if anybody's making that argument about Jalen Hurts, they should also be making that argument about Hargrave and Bradbury and everything. If they are truly leaders, right? That's what we're hearing about Jalen Hurts. If you're a real leader, and I did a whole thing on this on the Eye on the Enemy podcast last week, because this made me mad when this narrative started going around. If the implication, if Jalen Hurts doesn't go outside the structure of NFL contracts that has been in place and is in place for everyone, and go to Howie Roseman and say, I'm going to take less money than Daniel Jones, right? This is basically what people are arguing they want Jalen Hurts to do. If he doesn't voluntarily go in there and say, I want to do this for the betterment of the team, the implication then is that Jalen Hurts is not a team first guy, right? So if you're not a team first guy, then what are you? You're a me first guy. And that's going to be that's going to be what's hung around Jalen Hurts' neck if he doesn't go in and voluntarily do that. It's an unfair expectation. It's an unreasonable expectation. It's not fair, and people should stop it. Because you're right, no one else on the team is being held to that standard. And I don't care if quarterbacks make up 25% of the cap overall. They're that good. And the work that Jalen Hurts put into this to make himself the player that he is, he's earned whatever the fair market value for him tells him he should make. It should not be expected of him to do that. If he voluntarily goes in and says to Howie Roseman, here's what I want to help you out, I'm not going to, great. But that should not be an expectation placed on him or any other player on the Eagles.
No, I think the NFLPA might implode if that happened,
would,
John.
Exactly right.
They would be very upset. No, it's ludicrous, especially for, maybe on the 5th contract, if he gets to that point, Tom Brady level, you take a few left bucks, maybe, but certainly not on your 2nd contract when you made a little over $1 million last year and gave the Eagles about, I don't know, $100 million value. So the Eagles are still going to be ahead of the game. And one of the things I like about Howie, he explained it, the only better thing than not having to pay your quarterback is wanting to pay your quarterback, because that means he's really, really good. So I'm with you. People should stop saying that about Jalen Hurts. It is unfair. It's also unrealistic, the more important point. So stop talking about it. It's unrealistic.
Right. It's not happening.
Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about this team, however, and moving forward offensively, one of the big things is always running back. We get to this point of the season. Is how we going to take a running back? Bijan Robinson is so explosive. Had Daniel Jeremiah had his conference call, and he said, boy, if you could put Bijan with AJ and Devontae and Dallas Goedert and that offensive line, how good would it be? Derrick Henry is potentially on the trade market. Eagles fans, John, big name, give him to me. Does anybody notice one of the great things about the Eagles running game? Great offensive line, but it's the +1 aspect of the running game, what Jalen Hurts brings to the running game. Why in the world would you want to bring an eye back in and say, oh, just hand it off? Just hand it off. Then you're taking the +1 out of the offense, the RPO, the zone read. Anybody realize that? Why is everyone so obsessed with turning the clock back to 1975? And I want a running back.
Yeah, I think the eye running back is no longer a thing in football. There are only a couple of guys and a couple of teams that do that. And I think for those teams that have those types of guys, you have quarterbacks who are kind of mid, right? I mean, you have these guys who are not star quarterbacks. They're not like Jalen Hurts. And so you need that running back to carry the load for you. And that's not the situation with the Eagles. I love the idea of Bijan Robinson. I think if he's there late in the first round, if you decide to keep your number 30 pick or 31 pick, whatever it is, that late first round pick, if he's there and he's fallen that far, I think that's a good value pick at that point. And I would consider that. I'm not saying I would definitely pull the trigger. It kind of depends what else is there, what the Eagles' needs are. I think if the Eagles had less needs on defense, if they weren't losing so many guys and they had more stability on the defensive side of the football, I could see taking Bijan early in the draft. I could see it. You could make an argument for a team that's in a Super Bowl window right now, for a team that maybe doesn't want their quarterback to run quite as much and open himself up to injury quite as much as Jalen Hurts might over these next couple of years. I think you can make an argument that having a guy like Bijan Robinson makes some sense. I don't like the idea of a Derrick Henry because he's so much older and he's got so many much more miles on the tires. But at the end of the day, given where the Eagles are, what they need on defense, how they need to kind of fill some holes and get some depth, especially on the defensive side of things, and get some replacement, some future replacement folks like on the offensive line to replace Lane Johnson in a couple of years. I think you need to be thinking about the draft in those terms and not necessarily using a high value pick for a running back. I think there's some ways in which it makes sense, but at the end of the day, it's not what the Eagles do offensively. And I can't envision Howie Roseman taking a running back that high.
Oh, by the way, John, you mentioned the Jalen Hurts should take less than Daniel Jones. Did you see what Daniel Jones said yesterday? He gave the Giants a team-friendly deal so they could build around it. $82 million guaranteed in the first 2 years of the deal. But that was a team-friendly deal.
Team-friendly. And by the way, he's right. It is a team-friendly deal.
He's the going Daniel rate. Jones.
That's
the we're not talking about Aaron Rodgers here. It's Daniel Jones, $82 million guaranteed in the first 2 years. How is that team-friendly?
I mean, did Daniel Jones play this beautifully? He stunk for the first 4 years of his career. And then in his walk year, when they turn down the 5th-year rookie deal, he gets a great offensive coach. He has his best season, which still wasn't awesome, by the way, but was certainly his best, and put the Giants in a position where they had to pay him. But really that's where beautiful.
Guys, Joe Banner was on Rich Eisen's show, and he was giving Jalen Hurts advice, as Joe was wont to do. He likes to give everybody advice, but he recommended wait, because if Joe Burrow goes, if Justin Herbert goes, it's only going to go up and up and up and up and up. So, yeah, Daniel Jones is the going rate for Daniel Jones level of quarterback, and that means Jalen Hurts is going way over $50 million.
Yeah. And I've had some people say to me too, I'm not ready to give Jalen Hurts the big contract yet. Yeah. I need to see one more year. Well, if that's your plan, you're losing him, first of all. And second of all, you better be looking at that number 10 pick for a quarterback. So that's not happening, right? I mean, he's getting paid and he's going to get a market value.
Here's how it can happen, Sean. It would be Jalen's decision. In other words, he'd be taking Joe Banner's advice and waiting. It would be his decision.
Yeah.
And he might, say, go the Lamar Jackson route and say, I want to get every dime I can get, but I don't see Jalen doing that. But if it does happen, the Eagles still have the final year on his rookie deal. They still have the franchise tag, which they don't like to use, but they would obviously use it on him. So they still have all the leverage from an aspect of they're not going to lose them, at least for the next 3 years. That would be Jalen's decision. That's the only way that could happen, in my estimation.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But the fact that they do technically control him for 3 years, that's a little leverage on the Eagles side too. I mean, I don't know that comes up in negotiations, but maybe it does. Like it's we do have him under control, franchise tag and all that. So it behooves both sides to get something done, I think, sooner rather than later.
And by the way, Daniel Jones, 1-6 in the division this year. Oh, that's a team-friendly.
But he had a good playoff game against the worst pass defense in the NFL.
He played 2 playoff games here this year. Yes, one good and an ass kicking by the Philadelphia Eagles again this year. So I'm sorry, I just cannot buy team-friendly deal from Daniel Jones. We've been debating this now for a couple weeks since Howie went there in the combine. I need your take on it, John. Howie admitted that he went away from his usual modus operandi this year, that in season, he knew how many guys he had coming up on free agency. They usually like to get a deal done ahead of time, identify core players, get something negotiated before they get to free agency, and keep a piece or two in their core. He did none this year. Mm-hmm. And he said it was because they decided to get none done this year, because they were off to such a good start and they didn't want to try and identify, well, which of the 8, 9, 10, 11 guys do we want to try and do? Do we not want to try? And he felt that he could screw up the mojo in the clubhouse and the vibe with the team. They went to the Super Bowl and it was tied with 10 seconds to go. So that's a hell of a season. Mm-hmm. So if you believe not doing it gave you that much more impetus to have a really good season, but one that didn't end in a championship, we still have the free agency period to see who we can resign, who he loses, and the like. Did Howie Roseman handle it correctly in season when he decided we're not going to do it the way we usually do it?
I think so. I think they recognized they had something really special going on. I do think, especially in football, the locker room is how you really, it is a really big deal how those guys get along together. And I don't know how much it would have affected their play on the field if, say, Hargrave gets an extension and Bradbury doesn't, or Bradbury gets an extension and GJ doesn't, or whatever. But, at the end of the day, they didn't want to upset the apple cart. And I think the process trumps the results in this case. I mean, like you said, they were 10 seconds away, one play away, one stop away from being world champions. And if that happens, then unquestionably it was the right decision. So I think if I'm gonna say unquestionably it was the right decision if they won the Super Bowl, then I got to say it was the right decision losing the way they lost it, and even getting there, because the whole goal is to get to the Super Bowl. It's really hard to win that final game, as we saw this year and as we've seen with other Eagles appearances in Super Bowls. Even the one they won was like pulling teeth. So
yeah,
at the end of the day, I think Howie Roseman did the safe thing. I think he did the right thing. And like you said, there's still opportunities to sign these guys. You can still sign them. It's going to cost you a little bit more probably now, but the window of opportunity to sign who you want isn't closed. And so I think it was the right move.
Yeah. And I think kind of like Daniel Jones spinning his contract is team friendly. Howie spun that a little bit because he's right. I agreed with him, John. It's like you don't want to upset the apple cart in the locker room, but also he didn't have any stinking leverage. Everybody was having a career year.
Yeah.
So it was going to be difficult. You're going to have to overpay guys, and he doesn't want to overpay guys. So that was part of it as well. At John Stolnis, make sure you follow John on Twitter, especially, Phillies are getting ready to ramp up in spring training. You just let that slip out. Clubhouse. John's got Phillies on the mind, baby. Reigning National League champions.
Yeah, maybe we can get breaking news here. Stolnis, do you know what the hell is wrong with Andrew Painter's elbow? Because no one seems to know. It's the best kept secret since World War II, I would think.
The only thing I can think of is they're trying to figure out how to use a 3D printer to make him a new one. I mean, I don't understand what's going on with it. It makes no sense. I don't know.
Yeah. You mentioned past performance. We'll end it here with the Eagles. You don't want to pay for past performance. One of the things, and Howie's admitted, he likes his guys, man.
Yeah.
You want to pay for the past performance of Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox and bring him back?
I think for Brandon Graham, yes, because I think the number will be low enough that you're not expecting him to be a starter. You're expecting him to continue to provide the depth that he did last year. And what has been the big complaint about Brandon Graham over the years is that he's a good run stopper. He gets to the quarterback, but finishing has been a problem. He just wasn't able to pile up the sacks. Well, this year is the best year he's ever had sacking the quarterback. And I think he still has a lot of motor there. I think if you can get him for $4 or $5 million, I would absolutely do that. Fletcher Cox, I'm not as enamored in bringing back. But that being said, if you lose Hargrave, I think maybe you need to look at bringing back Fletcher Cox on a 1-year deal. And I don't know what number feels right with regard to Cox. And I don't know, like, there might be other defensive tackles out there that you could get that would do something similar, maybe for a little less. But I don't think so. Fletcher Cox is, I think he's like the 7th or 8th best defensive tackle in free agency right now. So I don't... Yeah. Because they're not going to cost a whole lot, because you're not giving Fletcher Cox $14 million or whatever the number was like you did this year. It's 4 or 5, right? I mean, that's
what Howard said. Boy, I think 4 is low.
$4 million.
If
$4
you
million, I'm bringing Fletcher back.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer to me. If I can get him for 4, I'm like, yeah, please come back.
I'm not bringing him back for more than that.
All right.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to look at it. All right, last thing, I put this to our guest yesterday and John as well. There's a lot of things that can happen between now and when the Eagles have their first camp, which, remember, the first camp of the year is before the draft. You have the one veteran camp, and then you have the rookie camp thereafter. And we'll have a better grasp on it then by who's here and or after the draft for sure. Are you okay with Kenny Gainwell as the lead back of the Philadelphia Eagles in 2023?
I think what they need, if Kenny Gainwell is getting the majority of the rushing attempts and he's your best pass catcher out of the backfield, I think I'm okay with that. But they do need to bring in a bigger running back to help with pass protection and to take some of those carries away. And I would bring back Boston Scott too. I think Scott's, for a third running back, perfect for what this team needs and what they do. So this team doesn't have like a primary ball carrier. I mean, we saw Miles Sanders have some games this year where he got a lot of carries, he got a lot of yards, and then kind of disappeared for long stretches as well. So I think Kenny Gainwell can get you close to what Miles Sanders gave you this year. I really liked the way his game progressed as the season went along. But I do think you need to bring in someone else. I think you need to bring in a bigger back, whether that's in the draft, whether you go and get somebody, maybe use your 2nd-round pick for that, or I think we're going to see Howie trade back and pick up like an extra 4th-round pick or something like that and use a running back in that kind of a situation there. You do need to bring somebody else in. I'm not comfortable giving Kenny Gainwell 20 carries a game every game. But I think if you're giving him 15, you're giving another guy 6 or 7, and you're giving Boston Scott what he normally gives you, and then you have your Jalen Hurts runs. I think that's your formula. And if that's how they're planning on using him, I'm fine with that.
By the way, guys, if I'm Joe Shane, I'm giving Boston Scott just an extra $1 million of that Daniel Jones team-friendly savings. Just so I don't have to deal with him. I don't even have to play him. Just get him away from my team. That's
next level thinking. That's next level thinking. Absolutely.
Pretty damn impressive by you, Johnny Mac. All right, John Stolnis, always a pleasure. Check out his Eagles podcast, Eye on the Enemy, and his Phillies podcast as well, where at some point over the next, whenever he next posts one, he's going to have the answer to what the hell is wrong with the elbow of the Phillies superstar rookie pitcher. Apparently, the only one who knows is Scott Boras, his agent. No one else here in Philadelphia does. Johnny, we love whenever you come on with us. Thanks for doing it today, big guy.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, John.
John Stolnis, Bleeding Green Nation, here with us on Birds 365. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac coming back. Next out, we're going to have another good guest. 2 good guests today, guys who are always good when they come on. Our pal Chris Landry, former NFL coach, scout, still consultant to NFL teams, out at the Combine. He'll fill us in a lot on what happened in Indy last week. But we've still got 20 minutes before we get to him.